Welcome to the Juice Box with Juice Springsteen, covering the week that was in professional wrestling. And welcome once again to another edition of the Juice Box. I am Juice Springsteen. Interesting week that was. Money in the Bank. Interesting anniversary as I record this. A lot of different stuff to talk about. AEW, WWE, and everything in between. We also will do a little Ask Juice at the end of this show. So it will be filled with a little bit of a Q&A. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at JuicySteen, Juicy Wrestling Closet on Instagram. You can follow this show, juicysteen.podbean.com. Also, if you could go to iTunes, you could find this show, rate it, review it, give it 5 stars. That'd be fantastic. You can also check this podcast out on Google Podcasts, I do believe. So, first and foremost, I'd like to send the condolences from the Juice Box over to the friends and family of Darren Drozdov, aka Droz, someone we lost recently. One of the most heart-wrenching stories ever in pro wrestling. Darren Drozdov, hurt very quickly in his career. Paralyzed from the waist down, from an accident, of course, but he never really held any ill will towards D'Lo, and really lived positively up until the end. He lived his life the best that he could, and I know WWE really did a lot to help financially throughout the years, and I more or less remember him as a member of LOD 2000. I remember him from his appearance on Beyond the Mat. He's got a puke. That whole thing. But yeah, it was sad to see that Draws passed away. Hopefully he's in a better place now. Because I as positive as he was, I really would never wish what he had to endure on anybody. So, rest in peace to Draws. But yeah, we had a crazy weekend. We'll talk a little Money in the Bank leading into Raw. We'll talk about that. We will, with the trial of the Tribal Chief tonight on SmackDown from Madison Square Garden, which should be fantastic. I'll also discuss some AEW with a little bit of Dynamite, what we've got cooking there. I also will do a little bit of an interesting piece on a very interesting anniversary. As I record, it's 25 years to the day. We'll mention that a little bit. We'll get to that. Play a little audio from such event. We'll also, of course, do Ask Juice to close out the show. So, shouldn't be too crazy. But back in the saddle again. Thanks a lot. Thanks again to Josh Eisenberg, who filled in last week for the predictions show. He came in, tagged him in, and I love doing the prediction shows with Josh. Wouldn't say our predictions were spot on. Money in the Bank definitely had its share of surprises, and we will touch on those in a little bit. But first, let's get into the AEW of it all. Now, we're only really going to touch on what happened on Dynamite. Coming out of Forbidden Door, which I briefly touched on last week before the Money in the Bank predictions, I thought Forbidden Door was a fantastic wrestling show. Had a lot of intrigue, a lot of great matches. Kenny Omega and Will Ospreay tore the house down. Hopefully we get a third installment of those two wrestling at Wembley Stadium. More on London and big pay-per-views later on. But we have the fake Battle Bowl Blind Eliminator Tag Team Tournament, and we had Darby and Orange Cassidy advance. Seems as if they're gonna finally hook on to Swerve and Keith Lee officially breaking up, as they got even thrown together as a tag team now, and they still couldn't coexist. I'll get to who I think is supposed to win this tournament later. The Acclaimed, huge pops for them every single week. They had a great little crowd easy for me to say. Great little crowd interaction as they were in Canada, in Edmonton, which was very cool to see. Speaking of Canada, Chris Jericho got interrupted by Don Callis, and all we got was a maybe. So either we are going to see Chris Jericho and Don Callis become two of the more hated individuals in AEW, or maybe we get a Chris Jericho joining the Elite and then getting turned on, or turning on the Elite and joining with the BCC. I don't know what we're going to get with those two. The heat that Don Callis is getting every single time he tries to talk on the mic really is something to behold. He is really stepped into. I mean, he's been this heel for a while, but the role that he's currently in really allows him to, garner that heat. It's not cheap heat either. And in the WWE side of things, Dom Mysterio, Dirty Dom, as he's now referred to, he is at the top of the heap in regards to heat there. But between the two, man, they both are just getting nuclear reactions from the audience. Thank God. And I'll get into it a little bit with Money in the Bank later with the WWE audience and stuff. But WWE is firing on almost all cylinders right now. But I digress. Let's get back to the AEW. Of it all, it's clear we're getting the BCC versus the Elite in Blood and Guts. Now, seems like Yuta is injured. Don't know what that means, but it's also clear that there's an opening in the Elite side of things for Blood and Guts. Could that be Kota Ibushi? I tend to think it is. I don't know who we're going to see for the BCC. I don't know what they've got up their sleeve, but July 19th is rapidly approaching. Blood and Guts is happening once again. Bryan Danielson cannot wrestle in it once again, unfortunately, but we'll see what happens. Takeshita and Omega potentially going forward in a match, which would be very interesting. I like Takeshita. I like his character is intriguing to me, to say the least. Very good as a villain, and I would almost prefer to refer to Takeshita as a villain instead of a heel. I think he's definitely more suited as not necessarily like a Bond villain, like a James Bond villain, but he's definitely got that. He kind of reminds me of Christian with his gear, although it's more of a leather jacket instead of a turtleneck. But he's got that, again, just a villainous air about him that I really do enjoy, and I hope Takeshita gets a big spot against Omega, maybe next week. But Britt Baker gets eliminated from the Owen Hart tournament, which then we get Sky Blue confronting Ruby Soho, getting them ready for their semifinal next week. As I've stated, I believe 2 weeks ago, when I saw the brackets, that Sky Blue should be the one to win this tournament. I think she's got a lot of promise, and I don't see why she couldn't take the torch as a younger talent to lead the way for AEW. But the best part of Dynamite, I mean, I will touch on this briefly though before we get to that. Actually, The Nick Wayne vignette was very heartfelt. I quite enjoyed it. Apparently, we're getting Nick Wayne and Swerve Strickland next week on Dynamite, which we just had Swerve versus Tanahashi last week or 2 weeks ago on Collision. So, really getting some quality in-ring work from Swerve, who can put on the best of matches, unlike most others on the roster. So to see him get a shot with up-and-coming Nick Wayne, who, if you haven't seen Nick Wayne wrestle, tune in to Dynamite. You will be blown away. I feel like he's going to really make a name for himself on a national scale next Wednesday. But the big highlight for me for AEW Dynamite this past week was MJF and Adam Cole. Now, they've been doing this interesting storyline of, can they coexist? You know, it seems like Cole still wants to go after the AEW title, as they had a draw in the Eliminator match. MJF seemingly knows that Adam Cole has his number and would choose to befriend him instead of trying to antagonize him. But the best part about it is that MJF is going so over the top. He called Adam Cole during a live Twitch stream. He is doing, the babyface entrance. He's doing the Adam Cole entrance, the mannerisms. But as I say that, they're both still doing the heel "we hate Tony Schiavone" thing that they both can agree on. MJF produced a cake and some streamers and almost had Adam Cole get the cake, but Cole was smarter than MJF gave him credit for. Put MJF's face in the cake. They had now I mentioned the Nick Wayne vignette narrated by Darby Allin, which I thought was fantastic. But the MJF Adam Cole gym segment I thought was even better. And this is something that AEW doesn't really do all that often. Or they haven't done it a lot, but they're doing it more, which, are skits or little vignettes. AEW could always use more, just to help the development of characters, little nuances to the characters that you can't normally put in a match per se. Those types of things you can get accomplished in a taped vignette. And I think MJF and Adam Cole can not only carry segments that are live, segments that are taped, but I think they can carry this program of one good guy-ish and one terrible guy, but they both kind of coexist for certain reasons. It reminds me of Sting and Lex Luger's tag team in, I believe, early 96, where Sting, perennial babyface, never was a heel until Fall Brawl 99 for a hiccup. But Luger always was a heel, always was a face. Never he was Big Show before Big Show was Big Show. And the best part was Sting was always loyal to Luger. They were best friends. In real life, they owned the gym, Main Event Fitness, I do believe, in Atlanta. So they always were buddy throughout the years. However, they had their brawls, if you will. Super Brawl 2, as a matter of fact, the last match Luger had before going to the WBF, then the WWF, where Sting won the WCW World title from Luger. But they've been pretty well connected throughout the years as a team. So in this incarnation, when Luger and Sting won the titles, they won them in a way that was pretty shifty. Luger hit, I believe, one of the members of Harlem Heat with a roll of quarters and won the match. Sting didn't see it, and Luger was just thrilled that they won the match. Really tried to be over the top, like, hey, we won, and, they would do an entrance where Sting is high-fiving fans, but in the background, Luger is ignoring the fans. And then as soon as Sting looks around to see what Luger's doing, he immediately goes and, gives high fives to fans and is a babyface. And the Road Warriors tried to get a match with Sting and Luger was like, hey, what about other teams that deserve a shot? What about, State Patrol, which is like, Buddy Lee Parker and someone else, like a jobber tag team. But he, it's like, oh, these guys deserve a shot because they would be easier to defeat instead of just saying, oh, we'll just give the Road Warriors a shot because Sting was very naive is a word for it, as the babyface who wants to go against the top talent or what have you. But Luger was like, no, these other teams deserve a shot. So I love that dynamic of heel, face. They coexist to a certain extent, but MJF is going to turn. We don't know when that's going to happen, but I think they could really stretch this out for a couple more weeks and get a lot of good stuff out of it. I have a feeling that MJF and Adam Cole will actually win the tag titles, which I think would be fantastic. I think it would be a great little avenue to travel for this particular feud. And if they can coexist and they can become champions, then you see something dissolve. Then you see MJF turn into who he really is, and we see where we go from there. But a lot of good stuff from Dynamite. Collision this weekend, we've got Samoa Joe and CM Punk. That will be a doozy, to say the least. So before we get into Raw, let's go into the Money in the Bank of it all. The pay-per-view, the PLE from London that I had been anticipating for quite some time. Sorry about the extra noise there. But for quite some time, these international PLEs have really, really been strong. Montreal, even the Saudi shows, Puerto Rico, Wales Cardiff last September. Money in the Bank did not disappoint. I was off on most of my predictions, unfortunately, but fortunately, that's exactly what I would want. I like that everything is really unpredictable these days in regards to what's going on with the storylines at WWE. I'm just going to try to run down as much as I can here. Damian Priest wins Money in the Bank. LA Knight did not. He was super over. Seems like he's not done. He'll probably get a shot at the U.S. title. I think WWE wants to give him a shot with a title and see how he can carry himself in the title before really pulling the trigger on him. And they might know that the trigger could be best pulled at a bigger show, potentially like a WrestleMania. We'll get into all too early Royal Rumble predictions here after we conclude this little Money in the Bank sesh. But Logan Paul and Ricochet. So, excuse me again. Ricochet and Logan Paul tried a Spanish fly spot that, if it would have been flawless, could have been one of the greatest spots I've ever seen in my life as a wrestling fan. But, card subject to change, it kind of was a botch, and then they decided to do it anyway, and both Logan and Ricochet, relatively unscathed, but it looked so dangerous, and because the spot really didn't work out the way that I think they wanted, they filmed a little bit of a backstage where they, brawled after the fact, and it seems as if they're still going to go with Ricochet Logan Paul at SummerSlam. Now, they also planted a seed, I would assume, on the podcast Impulsive with Logan Paul. he mentioned how the spot was botched and it was supposed to go a certain way, and Ricochet wanted to do it anyway, and it seems like, Logan's planting a seed there for the match with Ricochet. I would wager at Ford Field in Detroit, August 5th, for SummerSlam, which, regardless of the botch, I do think that match could be spectacular, and I cannot wait for that. We got Liv Morgan and Raquel Rodriguez winning the WWE Women's Tag Titles because of a Shayna Baszler turn. Wow, unexpected, but thrilling, and the right move. We'll get Shayna and Ronda at SummerSlam. Seems like Ronda's on the way out, potentially for good for WWE. When that happens, we'll touch on her career, but for now, I still think she is going to wrestle at least at SummerSlam. Even if she is done-ish with WWE for the most part after SummerSlam, I'd like to think she'll come back at some sort of manner in the future. So I'm not ready to close the chapter on her pro wrestling career just yet. But interesting booking. And Ronda with Shayna now, I like this pairing. I wanted this to happen. I figured it would happen later on and that they would be more dominant as a tag team. But they said, hey, Shayna can do it. She's good on the mic, and she killed it again on Raw. And I'm looking forward to this match. I don't know what we're going to get, but I'm looking forward to it. I was even more surprised, but to a lesser extent, when Gunther defeated Matt Riddle so quickly, 7 minutes, 45 seconds, but we get a returning Drew McIntyre, and it looks like we're getting Drew versus Gunther at SummerSlam, which that I'm looking forward to. I think those two guys specifically are like perfect for each other in ring, in their styles. They don't clash, they mesh. We could get a war at SummerSlam for the IC title. I would just hate if Gunther could not surpass Honky Tonk Man's reign. I think he'd have to go a couple of weeks into September to do that. So I'm hoping that they get the match off, but that's it. So we'll see. But Gunther and Drew McIntyre should be, as the kids say, a banger. Cody defeated Dom. Dirty Dom Mysterio. It is what it is. But we do get Cody and Brock having a brawl on Raw. Do we get a Texas Bull Rope? Do we get a fight pit? Do we get Hell in a Cell? I don't know. I'm hoping for Bull Rope. I'm hoping for Super Brawl 3, Vader versus Sting in a strap match vibe with a Bull Rope. I think Cody and Brock could tear the house down with a stipulation of that degree of intensity and brutality. But yeah, we're going to get the third match, and I don't know if the story will be complete if Cody wins. I'm just going to say when Cody wins. And I don't know what that would mean for Brock, but again, we're as of recording, we're still about a month away from SummerSlam, so they have some time to go forward with that. Money in the Bank for the women. Io Sky. What a finish to the match. Bayley, Becky, handcuffed through the ladder. Very interesting spot. Love to know who came up with that. Io Sky retrieves the briefcase. Don't know what's going to happen. Seems like Damage Control could need some controlling. Io Sky now controls her own destiny. And I think she's a good choice. I really think, well, first of all, she's held the briefcase longer than any woman ever has. And I really think that they'll maybe hold it to at least SummerSlam before they pull the trigger on her. I don't know who they'll have Io try to defeat. I was thinking we'd get Raquel versus Rhea, but now Raquel and Liv are tag champs, so maybe Maybe Io goes for Rhea's title. Maybe she sticks to Asuka, which would be great. I think either way, Io should cash in sooner than later. It doesn't have to be super quick. Again, longest than any other woman has held it. But I would love to see her with Asuka or Rhea, to be quite honest. Seth Rollins retains against Finn Balor, and it would now seem that Finn Balor, having a tough time now that he lost. And he inadvertently ruined the potential cash-in of Damian Priest. So now we're really starting to see a little bit of dissension in the Judgment Day, similar to the Bloodline. Although the Judgment Day Civil War, I think, will be held off for a few more weeks or months. I would have loved to see Finn pick up the win against Seth and then Damian go against Finn for the title. I thought that would have been a really interesting pivot, but Finn was not in the cards. And I think they want to establish that this new world title, the first reign, whoever has it first, turned out to be Seth, I think should hold it for a little bit, get some good defenses in, and then he can lose it as a valiant champion. But speaking of champions that never lose or get pinned, Roman Reigns gets pinned by Jey Uso, 32 minutes, 10 seconds, Bloodline Civil War, cinema, whatever you want to call it. Great stuff. The Stack'em pin, kick out, the super kick, the Superman punch, super kick, spear back to back to back was brilliantly done. And now we get the Tribal Chiefs trial tonight on SmackDown. If you recall, Roman's first ever pinfall on WWE TV was the exact same conclusion where Jey got the pin. It's almost 3 years now we're in this thing. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I think the Bloodline is the greatest storyline in the history of WWE. Every match, every PLE that, involves those guys in any way, whether it's a SmackDown, Raw, PLE, International PLE, the nuances, the intricacies of each little part of the story, they've strung it out for 3 years almost now, and yet I still don't find it boring. And I'm, if anything, I'm more captivated as time goes on. So, can't wait to see what's next with that. And of course, I would be remiss. John Cena randomly shows up at Money in the Bank. And I was mentioning big shows in London. Cena just comes out and says, you guys are great. The fans are great. This is a wonderful crowd. What do you think about having WrestleMania in London? Now, a couple things. Huge pop. I mean, the camera was shaking. He got them off their feet. He had the crowd in the palm of his hand. I don't think John Cena would have cut this promo. He would never have just made a random surprise appearance at Money in the Bank in London and cut this promo specifically asking about WrestleMania coming to London if WWE not only thought about it, but probably potentially pinned this show in the calendar for potentially next year, 2025 rather, or 2026 at Mania either 41 or 42. I would not be shocked if WrestleMania does go to London within the next 3 years. And it would be a hell of a weekend if they could pull it off. I think they can. I think the last What, since Clash of the Castle, so September, we're coming up on it for the last year of Triple H's first year, rather, of Triple H's regime, where all these shows have been great and the international PLEs specifically have been so well received. A WrestleMania across the pond for the first time would be a momentous show for the history of the company. So I'm looking forward to seeing if that comes to fruition. With All In going to Wembley, and I'll keep presenting this until I know. We still don't know how we're supposed to watch All In. No pay per view announcement, no streaming announcement, nothing. All Out the following week in Chicago, sure. Everything. Fight TV, pay per view, what have you. Nothing for All In. So we'll see. But yes, WrestleMania in London will be great. But the bigger piece here, John Cena comes out, and does this random promo, and Grayson Waller comes out, holds his own, and if anything, did more than I would have anticipated someone to do that young in that big a spot with arguably the biggest star in the last 20 years. Held his own with John Cena, I have to say. I don't know if, and he wanted WrestleMania to be in Australia. I wouldn't rule that out in the future as well. If WrestleMania goes international to London and it's a success, which I have no reason to believe it wouldn't be, I think you could definitely see one in Australia at another year, for sure. And I think Canada could get one as well. I really think they'll start tapping into these things as we progress with time. But I mentioned earlier, here is my early, as of July 6th, 2023, my early final four of the Men's Royal Rumble should be Grayson Waller, Gunther, L.A. Knight, and Randy Orton. Give me those four guys as your final four, and I think you have a splendid potential for, you get the veteran as Randy Orton, as he being the veteran but can go all the way to the final four potentially after being out for so long would be so nice to see. Waller can hold his own, and then I think either Gunther or LA Knight are poised to win the event. So give me that every day that ends with Y. We'll come back to it in January. We'll see if by January, which will be the year anniversary of this program, as we're about halfway through the year, where I stand for the Royal Rumble predictions and who I think will be in the final four. If three of the four are healthy and are around, and Orton still hasn't debuted or returned, I could see it happening, and I would maybe potentially make the same prediction. So that was Money in the Bank, and we had Raw, a little bit more answers with the Shayna thing, the potentially breaking up of the Judgment Day, what have you. So a lot of interesting stuff. Like I said, WWE's firing on all cylinders. It is so nice to see, I don't know how else to put this, but I noticed this during the men's Money in the Bank. Now, I know the crowd, and I know it's tough to talk about it like this because the crowd was so crazy, and I've said this before, I keep saying it until they stop going international to places they haven't been in 20 years. But these crowds haven't seen shows like this in over 20 years. So they were at a fever pitch the entire night, regardless of who's in the ring. But I will say, even though it was the opening match, all 7 guys in that first Money in the Bank match were over. Every single one of them. Whether they were booed or cheered or indifferent or both, every single person in that match was cheered. Everybody was cared for, right? It's so nice to see that everybody can care about these characters and the trajectory of those characters through the whole match. WWE really is hitting a stride right now, which they couldn't be at a better time for the biggest event of the summer. So SummerSlam could be something special, man. If as if these other PLEs aren't, but it's unbelievable that Nakamura, LA Knight, Santos Escobar was over. Butch was hugely over, of course. Logan Paul, LA Knight, Priest. Everybody was just they are cared for, and that's the hard part with wrestling is that there's so many wrestlers. I mean, you can call it a problem with AEW too. It's just too many guys or girls on the roster to keep up with, or some will get over, but maybe not the others. Oh, LA Knight's the most over, but man, everybody in the match was over, and it's just positive to see. So, looking forward to seeing what they got up their sleeve for SummerSlam. We'll get that in a couple of weeks, but very interesting weekend over the course of the last 5 or 6 days. 4th of July weekend here in the States. Fireworks, hot dogs, baseball, all that stuff, and of course, pro wrestling. Now, we will close today's show with a little bit of Ask Juice, but before we get there, I would like to do a little This Week in Pro Wrestling History, This Day in Pro Wrestling History. Sorry for the huge audio spike there. I'm recording this on July 6th, 2023. 25 years ago, even though, I remember it like it was yesterday. I was 5. A lot of people that are wrestling fans, especially in my age range, or even older, that I grew up talking to, or, Hulkamania. This is the greatest thing ever. It was the wrestling boom of the 80s. It's what made wrestling huge. And it did. And I acknowledge it. I get it. I watched those years back and love them. Hogan Andre, Mania 3. I get goosebumps watching that whole thing play out. And a lot of different moments pre 93, but when I was born. But I thought about this in the last couple of years. It's fascinating to me, but this is how it went. Because I grew up in the 90s and I was a WCW guy, I grew up with Hulk Hogan as a heel. I did not grow up with Hulkamania. I did not grow up with eating your vitamins and saying your prayers. I grew up with Hollywood Hulk Hogan, this dastardly bad guy. And whether it was Sting or DDP or Luger or Goldberg, I was always just hoping that someone would beat Hulk Hogan, Hollywood Hogan, for the WCW title. July 6th, 1998, the Georgia Dome, 40,000 plus fans. Goldberg, who was a football player for Georgia. He was an Atlanta Falcon. He had to beat Scott Hall to get to the main event. It was on free TV. My Hogan Andre moment was Goldberg jackhammering Hogan and winning the title in front of all those fans. And as a special treat on this 25th anniversary of a match and a night that I will never forget, especially, and I tweeted this out earlier, there was a house show, I believe in 98, if not 99, and the wrestlers were arriving, and Goldberg pulled up in his van, I think he had like a sport van, and my dad lifted me up. I had my Goldberg shirt on, my Chicago Bulls starter jacket on, and I'm cheesing. I'm so happy that Goldberg was there, and my dad was happy to lift me up. And, of course, Goldberg's eyes were closed, but he was the man. And, however Goldberg is remembered now with some of the things later in his career that aren't as great, but not a lot of people get better as they age. You're listening to one of them. Goldberg's rise and triumph at this show is something that I'll never forget. So I would like to play the last 30 to 40 seconds of that match just so you guys get an idea of how exciting this moment was to me, and quite honestly, the pro wrestling world, who finally got to see Hulk Hogan lose, but clean in the center of the ring to a guy who was super, super over, and that wrestling was really changing. And 98 is when wrestling was at its biggest, arguably. So without further ado, here is from July 6th, 1998, the last 40 seconds of Goldberg versus Hulk Hogan, Hollywood Hogan, at the Georgia Dome. Enjoy.
And look at Goldberg. He's ready. He's poised. Okay, there's part one. Now finish him off. Finish him off. He's calling for it. This is it. This is it. Your career's on the line here. Do it. Do it. This place will erupt when he picks him up. He's got him up! Oh, hell yeah! 1, 2, 3! Thank you! Thank you! Thank you! We've got a new heavyweight champion of the world! The first undefeated man in the history of this sport to ever win the world championship!
Wow. I mean, you can hear it in the clip. The crowd was at a fever pitch. Bobby Heenan was so emotive. I mean, he hated Hulk Hogan for how many years? And no one believed that he could be a bad guy. And then he was a bad guy after all. And Heenan was right. But for Heenan to get the call, oh, I get chills. I got chills listening to that clip. I get chills thinking about that clip. Just what an incredible, incredible night 25 years ago. Man, time really, really flies, man. So hope you guys enjoyed that little clip. First time including some outside audio. Hopefully this show doesn't get destroyed for airing some copyrighted audio, but I mean, it was 25 seconds, and I prefaced it by saying this is a clip, and this is not owned by me. I own all the audio except for that clip. That is copyright WWE. So now that is out of the way, let's just tackle 2 or 3 Ask Juice questions. Hashtag Ask Juice. Got some interesting little topics, but I'm not going to take too long on each one, but we'll get there. Ask Juice. Will the MJF Adam Cole relationship stick around longer than planned since it's over with the fans? And shout out to Wrestling Nation for that question. I do believe all the questions are Wrestling Nation related, so thanks you guys. You guys know who you are. First of all, I think that it is planned to go as long as it needs to go. So that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to pivot at a certain point, but I think that once they got the ball rolling and once they start seeing potentially the ratings from the segments and how over the backstage vignette taped, any of those certain segments were done and received by the fans, which has been all positive so far, I think that they'll continue doing those until they either run out or, I would wager that they'll get to the finals of this Eliminator tournament. They'll win this tournament. They'll probably win the tag titles. And if they win the tag titles, then they could really take this thing for a while before eventually imploding and having another match, single Adam Cole versus MJF, but for the title being on the line instead of just the Eliminator, because Cole was that close. They took it to a time limit draw. So I do think that he's got his number and that they will have another match. But I do think it'll take some time. So I will say it's going to be around longer. Not just because they have some other stuff to get going with the titles and if it's going to work like that, but anticipate. But I do think if the fans love it, which so far they do, I love it. My opinion is not that great compared to the vast majority of fans out there, but I would definitely say that the fans enjoying the segment will help it thrive and get more momentum going forward. So hopefully that answers that question. Um, what do you think of the current Bray Wyatt return rumors, and would you rather see him return in his current gimmick or as the Fiend? Um, if I've answered this question before, I do apologize. But I like to answer it again because I keep seeing these things about Bray Wyatt coming back, and there's photos of him looking great, and I think, did I see this already? I'm already asking myself, did I answer this question already? But did I, you know, he's had this happen two or three, four, 5 times now, where he goes away for a while, he comes back, he gets inserted with a different. Now he probably wouldn't have another gimmick, but he had such a huge return after all that time, and a pitch black match with the LA Knight, and that was it. Like, that was it. They kind of just got rid of everything. No Mania match, nothing. I don't know what I'd like to see him come back as. I would like to think that they would just bring him back as the Fiend, but then they book themselves into a corner because the Fiend is pretty unstoppable. Now there's 2 titles now, so he could, in theory, win the World Heavyweight title and not necessarily have to world destroy to take a title from Roman. He could just beat Seth Rollins. They have a pre-existing story, so I think that it could work if he comes back as the Fiend. I think he should just come back as Bray Wyatt. I don't know if you need to do the Firefly Funhouse stuff. Not that it wasn't over or that it didn't work, but I just think Bray Wyatt being a creepy. I honestly think you could combine the supernatural pieces of the Fiend, but with the edge of early NXT Bray Wyatt and compounded with 2017 Wyatt family Bray Wyatt when we had Braun Strowman in the fold and all those guys, Harper and Rowan. I think if you have a more realistic character, but with tendencies of the Fiend, I think that you really have something. Because I think the best part of Bray Wyatt is that he's so damn good on the mic. So I'd hate for them to just continue doing pre-taped Firefly Funhouses. Those are great and all, but I think we've moved past that. They got a lot of money out of it. They did the match with Cena. Like, all that's great, but maybe they could still do stuff like that down the road. But I would love a kind of a combo of all his incarnations and just one straight up Bray Wyatt, demented, disturbed, will do anything it takes to win, and that he'll do what it takes to win. So I think there's meat on the bone there. I just have a tough time thinking that they'll do it right after so many times of getting it wrong. So, and then we'll do one more. What are the worst chicken tenders you have ever had? Hashtag Ask Juice. Now, if you know me, you think you know me. I love chicken tenders. I love chicken fingers. I love chicken nuggets. I love any sort of chicken parmesan, chicken parm sandwich, chicken noodle soup. I eat a lot of chicken. It's my preferred meat of choice, and it's tough for me to say which are the worst chicken tenders. As much as I'd love to throw a company under the bus, as long as they have chicken tenders, I'm really grateful that I can have an option there. Not to say that I wouldn't eat something else, but my preferences are chicken, so, chicken or bust. I'm going to really think. I would say it's got to be some sort of chain. Now, man, it's not blasphemous, but a restaurant, that's a loose word. for it, but I would say over the years, Arby's has actually gotten worse with their chicken tenders. They, I used to get their chicken sliders, which were just like these mini sliders, chicken. Was it provolone, melted provolone? I'd get a few of those, and they would use the regular chicken tenders for those, and they were pretty good. But now it seems like they're almost tinier chicken tenders, but they almost look like boneless wing tenders, which aren't as good. And they're just not as good as they used to be. I don't know why they changed that. It's not that they changed the formula or anything. It's chicken fingers, for God's sake. But they're just not as strippy as Popeyes or KFC, or there's more breading and less meat. That's what I don't like. So I guess I could say Arby's, which is a very unfortunate, because Arby's is a great little, throwback to the 90s, and curly fries and horsey sauce and Arby's sauce, and feels like an Arby's night, and David Puddy and Seinfeld. And Arby's is great and all, but man, I think they have fallen off. So if you're out there, you work for Arby's, higher up, please, for the love of God, find another way to make your chicken tenders. That would make Juice Springsteen a very happy podcaster. So I think that's all. Man, once again, I always think these shows are going to, not have a lot of... a lot of times I think these shows are going to end up like Arby's chicken tenders. Not a lot of meat and a whole lot of breading. But today, I really did push through Money in the Bank that had a lot of meat on the bone. We even had some early Rumble talk. Covered some AEW, some good, some bad. I got to play you guys that clip from the Georgia Dome, which hopefully doesn't get this show off the air, kicked off the air. And we did a little Ask Juice, which I always find fun. I really enjoy just hearing what some of my friends potentially have to ask. And because, everybody comes from different backgrounds, and they have different, questions and concerns that maybe other guys have deeper or not as fun answers for. And I really like to delve into it my own way. Because if you enjoy that, that's why you're probably listening to this show. So thankful for all of you guys who do listen to this show. Continue to do this every single week right here on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, juicysteen.podbean.com, Juicy Wrestling Closet on Instagram, Juicy Steen on Twitter. Not sure if you're going to see me on Threads, but we'll see what happens with the old Musk-Zuck cage match that potentially could close out SummerSlam in Detroit. But yeah, we'll have a lot more next week as we get closer to Ford Field in Detroit, Michigan for SummerSlam, the biggest party of the summer. Cannot wait for that. I'm assuming we'll get Josh Eisenberg on board for some predictions for that show coming up in a couple of weeks. So once again, just follow me on Twitter at Juicy Steen. Let's talk wrestling, Seinfeld, or just anything. I'm Juice Springsteen, and this has been the Juice Box, and hopefully you guys will join me next week for another episode of the Juice Box.
That was the Juice Box with Juice Springsteen. Make sure to subscribe to the Juice Box wherever you listen to podcasts.